Hiya, I'm Pimmie. Today I want to tell a bit about hand sewing. Um, the clothes I use for living history, like the medieval clothes I showed you yesterday, are all sewn by hand. And yeah, this sounds like an impossible amount of work, but um, if you practice enough, then it goes faster. And of course, it is more work and it goes slower than if you use a sewing machine. But there are some tricks to speed things up and to make it easier and more comfortable to sew by hand. And I want to show you a couple of those, the ones that I use. But first, let me show the kind of seams I make and the stitching I do. On the cape I wore yesterday, this is what I use most, which is a small running stitch. And every 3 or 4 stitches I do a back stitch, and then I go on again. So this is relatively fast. And the other one I use a lot is a whip stitch, which goes around the edge of a seam. See if I can put some more light onto that. I think it shows. There are 5 things that I use that are very useful, that I like. And the first one is a thimble. I always use a thimble when I'm hand sewing, and most people, when they think of a thimble, they think of this, a metal one, which I put a thimble on my middle finger, and I push the needle with that. But this one isn't as comfortable for me. It pinches in the edges of my finger, and yeah, I can use it, but not for long. What I use is a leather thimble, and this one is a clover thimble, and it's soft and comfortable, and it doesn't sweat. Before I had one that had a metal part up here and silicone on the inside, which gripped the finger. Really quite comfortable, but it becomes sweaty after a while, and when you're stitching a long time. So this one is perfect. This is a full leather thimble. Clover also has one with a coin insert, which is very clever because you don't wear through the leather as fast by pushing the edge of your needle. But for me, it's the coin is in the wrong place, and I use the edge of my finger, so it's in the wrong place, and if I turn it a bit, then it just doesn't fit as nice. So I use the all leather one. And the second thing is good needles. I like a good sharp needle with a not too big a needle. This is one of my bigger needles, and they have a relatively large eye. Not sure if that's visible. and the eye is has to correspond with your sewing thread. You have to be able to easily thread the needle. And the finer the cloth I'm sewing, the finer the needle I use. And the really thin, tiny, sharp quilting applique needles, those are perfect for really delicate fabric. Now on to thread. For my historical clothes, I like to match the fabric. So for the woolens, I use this, which is in German. It's darning wool, and it's the same composition as sock yarn, so it's 75% wool, 25 of nylon, and it's a 2-ply. I can buy this in little 5-gram cards, but you could just take a piece of sock yarn and unply it and split it so you have a strand of 2 plies. I like a bit grippy sewing thread, so not the really smooth nylon that you use for a sewing machine. And the darning thread really fits the bill, and it's strong, so it's perfect. For linens, I like to use linen yarn, linen thread, and linen has the problem that it'll wear down while you're sewing. So to combat that, I run it over a piece of beeswax. I have a little lump of pure beeswax, and by waxing it, I the thread is smoothed out and strengthened, and the fibers won't fray while sewing. So I have the lump of wax, and I pull the yarn of the sewing thread over it and pull it under my finger a couple of times, and it'll make a groove in the surface of the wax, and the yarn is coated in wax. I do this with the darning wool as well, because those will shred and fray sometimes as well. So now the next bit, and this is something I only recently started using, is a clamp. I like to clamp my let's see if I can show you. I like to clamp my sewing to the table, and that way I can keep tension on one end and sew the seam, and it really speeds up the process and goes about twice as fast than if you're trying to do it this way by keeping tension on a piece of the seam between your finger and your thumb, and your hand gets sore as well after an hour of stitching like this. And the other thing I did was clamping it between my knee and the edge of the table, but a clamp is easier. So that was a bit of tips and tricks on sewing and the things I use to speed up the process. And I hope to see you next time.